The woman dying on this operating table told her 5-year-old son he was worthless trash. That little boy grew up to become Dr. Marcus Williams, one of the country's most brilliant surgeons. And today, only his hands can save her life. "Don't you dare die on me. Not like this," screamed Dr. Marcus. "But here's the question that will haunt you. If someone destroyed your childhood, would you let them die?" Meet Dr. Marcus Williams. At 30 years old, he's one of America's most celebrated heart surgeons, chief of cardiology at Metropolitan General Hospital, winner of the National Medical Excellence Award. His colleagues call him a miracle worker. His success rate is unprecedented. His bank account has 7 figures. But here's what they don't know about Dr. Marcus Williams. Every single night after saving someone else's life, he sits in his car and cries. Every achievement feels hollow. Every success feels meaningless. He lives in a mansion but comes home to emptiness. He saves families every day but has none of his own. He's surrounded by colleagues but has no real friends. Marcus Williams beat impossible odds to become a doctor, but success couldn't heal the wound that's been bleeding in his soul for 25 years. You see, Marcus carries scars that no one can see. Scars from the day his mother looked him in the eye and told him he was the worst mistake of her life. But this story has layers that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, abandonment, and the power of forgiveness. Because the woman who shattered his world 25 years ago is about to walk back into his life in the most impossible way imaginable. And Marcus Williams is about to discover that some wounds can only be healed by the very person who created them. This is the story of a child who was thrown away, and the mother who never stopped loving him from a distance. What happens next will change how you see love, loss, and the incredible power of second chances. Forever. To understand the man Dr. Marcus Williams became, you have to understand the child he once was. And that story begins with love so pure, it makes what happens next even more devastating. 5-year-old Marcus Williams lived in a small apartment that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, not because of candles or air fresheners, but because his grandmother Rosa baked every single day. "Mijo, add the sugar slowly," Rosa says, guiding little Marcus's hands. "Just like life, you add sweetness little by little." "Abuela, when is Mama Diane coming back?" Rosa pauses, her weathered hands covering his small ones. "When she's better, mijo. When she's ready to be the mama you deserve." Every morning, Rosa would braid his hair. Every afternoon, she'd help with homework at the kitchen table. Every night, she'd teach him prayers in Spanish and English. "Now we pray for Mama Diane," Rosa whispers, her voice soft as a lullaby. Marcus kneels beside the bed, his small hands folded tight. "Why is Mama sick, Abuela?" he asks. Rosa brushes a curl from his forehead. "Sometimes people get sick in their hearts, mijo, but love can heal anything, even broken hearts." Marcus didn't know it would be their last prayer together. On the morning of March 15th, 1999, Marcus was at school, practicing the letter M. He dotted it carefully, proud of how neat it looked. The sun streamed through the classroom windows. Everything felt normal. But by the end of the day, his world had already begun to fall apart. He came home to find the kitchen filled with smoke. The cookies Rosa had been baking were burning in the oven. She lay on the floor, still wearing her favorite yellow dress. "Abuela, Abuela, wake up!" 5-year-old Marcus shook her gently, then harder. "I'll get your medicine. I'll call 911. For 4 hours, he stayed by her side, talking to her. He made her tea. He brought her favorite pillow. He even sang the lullabies she used to sing to him. When the paramedics finally arrived, they found Marcus curled beside Rosa, holding her cold hand, whispering, "Please don't leave me too, Abuela. Please don't leave me too." 3 days later, the house was silent. Marcus sat in Rosa's chair, her yellow dress folded neatly on the couch beside him. He hadn't cried since the ambulance took her. He was waiting for someone to tell him what would happen next. A knock came at the door. A woman with kind eyes knelt beside him. "Hi, Marcus. I'm Miss Campbell. I have some news for you." He blinked at her, silent. She smiled softly. "Your mama. We've found her. She's coming to get you." His eyes lit up, the first flicker of life in days. "Mama's coming home, really?" "Yes, sweetheart, your mama's coming home." Marcus spent 2 nights in a foster home, sleeping in a bunk bed with a toy giraffe, but he didn't care. He was going home. To her. The mother Rosa told him about during bedtime stories, the one with the beautiful smile who used to sing to him when he was a baby, the one who would love him like Rosa did. He held on to that image like a treasure. But the woman who stepped out of the rusted Honda wasn't the woman from the stories. She was thin. Her eyes darted nervously. She had dark circles under them and lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. "You're bigger than I thought," she said, not moving to hug him. "Mama!" Marcus ran to her. "I knew you'd come." She took a small step back. "Yeah, well, Rosa's gone, so I guess you're stuck with me now." The next morning, before Rosa's body could even be buried, Diane packed their things and drove off with Marcus. He watched Rosa's house disappear through the car window. No goodbye, no funeral, no closure. They disappeared into a world no 5-year-old should ever see. For 3 months, Marcus lived in abandoned buildings, slept in car back seats, waited outside strange motel rooms, watched his mother sell her body to buy small plastic bags that made her hands shake and her eyes go empty. "She's just sick," Marcus whispered to himself, covering his ears as men came and went. "She loves me. She just needs to get better, like Rosa said." He learned how to steal food from gas stations, how to count the money in Diane's purse to see if it was enough for a motel room, how to lie to police, how to keep quiet when things got loud. He protected her. He made excuses for her. He loved her desperately, even as she destroyed them both. The night of August 3rd, 1999, police raided the crack house where they'd been staying. "Get down! Get down!" Marcus, terrified, crawls into a closet, pulling clothes over his head. Through the keyhole, he watches his mother get arrested, screaming and fighting the officers. For 18 hours, Marcus stayed in that closet, too afraid to come out, listening to strangers ransack the house, waiting for his mother to come back for him. She never did. In the days that followed, Marcus learned what it meant to be forgotten. Social workers spoke about him in hushed tones, as if he couldn't hear them discussing his difficult placement. He stopped speaking entirely, communicating only through nods and desperate searching looks that asked the same question over and over. When is Mama coming back? 2 weeks later, when Diane finally sat across from Marcus in that sterile social services office, he still believed she had come to take him home. Ms. Campbell slides papers across the table. "Ms. Williams, you're voluntarily relinquishing your parental rights." Diane won't look at Marcus. "Yeah, I can't do this." Marcus tugs on her sleeve, his small voice breaking weeks of silence. "Mama, I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. I won't ask for food when you don't have money. I won't cry when you leave. I'll be perfect, I promise." Diane finally looks at him, her eyes cold and distant. "I never wanted you. You ruined my life. I wish you were never born." She grabs the small photo of Rosa that Marcus clutches, his only remaining connection to love, and throws it in the trash. "But Mama Rosa said you loved me," Marcus whispers, tears streaming down his face. "Rosa lied. I never loved anything about you. You're the reason my life is hell, the reason I can't get clean, the reason I can't be happy." As Diane walked out that door, she didn't just abandon Marcus. She murdered the part of him that believed he was worth loving. The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't the quiet of waiting. It was the hollow echo of a child's heart breaking in real time. Marcus sat in that chair long after the door closed, staring at the space where his mother had been, trying to understand how love could turn to poison so quickly. His first foster mother noticed the change immediately. "He doesn't speak, doesn't eat unless we force him. Something's broken in him," she whispered to her husband, not knowing that Marcus heard every word. The social worker recommended therapy, but how do you fix a 5-year-old whose mother told him he was the reason for her suffering? How do you heal a child who believes his very existence is a curse? Marcus would carry those wounds into a system that seemed designed to remind him, over and over, that he was unwanted. What he didn't know was that his mother's abandonment was just the first chapter in a story that would test every limit of human endurance. Over the next 7 years, Marcus would learn that his mother's cruelty was just the beginning. Each new placement felt like another confirmation of what Diane had told him, that he was a burden too heavy for anyone to carry. The Hendersons were devout Christians who saw Marcus as a mission field, a damaged soul to be saved through suffering. Mr. Henderson holding a belt. "The sins of the mother are visited upon the child. Kneel and pray for forgiveness." 6-year-old Marcus welts on his back. "But I didn't do anything wrong." "Your mother was a whore and a drug addict. That evil lives in you, boy. We're going to beat it out before it grows." They locked him in closets for hours, forcing him to pray away his mother's sins. In those dark spaces, Marcus would press his face against the door and whisper apologies for crimes he didn't understand, for an evil he couldn't feel but everyone insisted lived inside him. When the Hendersons gave up on saving him, Marcus learned not to hope that the next family would be different. Hope, he discovered, only made the disappointment sharper. The Johnsons took in foster kids for the monthly checks, treating children like profitable livestock. Marcus became their unpaid servant, a small ghost moving through their house performing endless tasks. Mrs. Johnson, counting money. "Earn your keep, boy. Food ain't free." 4 a.m. to midnight, Marcus cleaned, cooked, and did manual labor. When he collapsed from exhaustion at school, they told teachers he was lazy and ungrateful. Marcus learned to sleep standing up, to eat scraps without complaint, to make himself invisible when adults were angry. The Millers seemed different. Clean house, nice neighborhood, 2 cars in the driveway. For a brief moment, Marcus allowed himself to believe that maybe finally he'd found a real home. But Mr. Miller was a predator who saw Marcus's vulnerability as an opportunity. Late at night, when Mrs. Miller was working her nursing shifts, Mr. Miller would visit Marcus's room. What happened in those dark hours left scars that would never fully heal. When Marcus finally found the courage to tell Mrs. Miller what her husband was doing to him, she turned on him with a fury that felt familiar. "You're lying! You're just like your slut mother, trying to cause trouble. Pack your bags!" Each rejection came with variations of the same words. "You're just like your mother, worthless." By age 12, Marcus had lived in 7 different homes. Each one confirmed what his mother had told him. He was unlovable, unwanted, a burden that destroyed everything he touched. He had stopped crying when family sent him away. He had stopped hoping for birthdays or holidays. He had stopped believing that anywhere in the world was a place where he belonged. But then came the conversation that changed everything. Marcus had learned to move through buildings like a shadow, unnoticed and unheard. It was this invisible quality that allowed him to overhear the caseworkers talking in the hallway outside his latest placement meeting. He pressed himself against the wall, listening as their voices carried through the thin office door. "The William boy is being moved again," said the first caseworker, her voice tired. "3rd family this year." "What do you expect?" replied her colleague. "His mother was only 14 when she had him. He is a product of rape. The kid never had a chance." Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet. The words hit him like physical blows, each revelation reshaping everything he thought he knew about himself and his mother's hatred. "Poor kid doesn't even know the truth about his birth," the first caseworker continued. "Diane was just a child herself when it happened. No wonder she couldn't bond with him. He was a constant reminder of her trauma." Marcus slid down the wall, his legs unable to support him as the pieces fell into place. His mother's cold eyes, her violent rejection, her words about him ruining her life. Suddenly it all made a different, devastating kind of sense. "I'm not just unwanted. he whispered to himself later, alone in another temporary bedroom. I'm the reminder of trauma. I'm the reason she couldn't heal. For the first time, Marcus understood that his mother's cruelty wasn't about him. It was about what he represented. He was the living embodiment of the worst thing that had ever happened to her. No wonder she couldn't love him. No wonder she looked at him with such pain. But instead of breaking him further, this realization planted a different seed: determination. If he was born from something evil, then maybe his purpose was to create something good. Maybe his life could mean something beyond the trauma that created it. The next day, Marcus met the woman who would help him transform that seed of determination into something powerful. Mrs. Elena Anderson, 8th grade science teacher, noticed something that no one else had bothered to look for. While other teachers saw Marcus as another troubled foster kid, she saw a mind that absorbed information like a sponge, hungry for knowledge in a way that transcended his circumstances. She found him after class, reading advanced textbooks he'd borrowed from the library. Marcus, why are you reading college-level biology? Marcus looked up, instantly defensive. Why do you care? Everyone leaves anyway. Mrs. Anderson sat beside him, her voice gentle but firm. Because I see something in you that you don't see yet. You have a brilliant mind, and the world needs what you have to offer. She gave him his first medical textbook, Gray's Anatomy. That night, Marcus memorized the entire cardiovascular system chapter, not because he had to, but because for the first time in his life, learning felt like hope. While other kids played video games, Marcus studied. While they watched TV, he absorbed medical knowledge with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Mrs. Anderson became the first adult to invest in Marcus without wanting anything in return, and under her guidance, something remarkable began to emerge from the wreckage of his childhood. At 13, staring at his bruised reflection in another foster home bathroom, Marcus made a promise that would define his entire life. I will become someone so important that everyone who hurt me will regret it, he whispered to his reflection. I will save lives because no one saved mine. Mrs. Anderson had just witnessed the birth of Dr. Marcus Williams. She had no idea that in that moment she was also witnessing the beginning of a miracle, one that would take 20 years to unfold, and one that someone else had been quietly orchestrating all along. But first, Marcus would have to survive 7 more years of hell, and learn that sometimes the most powerful forces in our lives are the ones we never see coming. The transition from middle school to high school brought new challenges that would test every ounce of Marcus's determination. At 16, he was aging out of the foster system, which meant survival now depended entirely on his own resourcefulness. While his classmates were sleeping in warm beds, Marcus was starting his first job of the day. His schedule had become a carefully choreographed dance of desperation. 4 a.m. newspaper delivery, 6 a.m. school janitor duties before classes, 3 p.m. grocery store stock boy, 11 p.m. hospital cafeteria cleanup. 3 jobs, 3 hours of sleep, 1 meal a day if he was lucky. The exhaustion was bone deep, but Marcus pushed through it with the same determination that had carried him through foster care. He had learned that survival was about making yourself indispensable, about working harder than everyone else because you had no safety net to catch you if you fell. His classmates noticed his circumstances, but not with sympathy. Look, it's trailer trash trying to be smart, one popular student laughed. Dude, those clothes smell like they haven't been washed in weeks. Another chimed in. My dad says kids like him should just accept their place. Some people aren't meant for college. Marcus kept walking, clutching his books tighter. Their mockery stung, but he had learned something powerful. Their cruelty only fueled his determination. Every insult became motivation. Every rejection became proof that he had to succeed on his own. When it came time for college counselling, Marcus faced his biggest obstacle yet. Mrs. Thompson, his guidance counsellor, flipped through his file with barely concealed pity. Marcus, let's be realistic here. Your circumstances. Community college would be a more practical choice. Maybe learn a trade? Marcus, exhausted but unwavering. I'm applying to pre-med programs. With what money? Your grades are excellent, but you have no family support, no connections. These programs cost $60,000 a year. I'll find a way. Mrs. Thompson sighed. Honey, sometimes dreams have to adjust to reality. What Mrs. Thompson didn't know was that Marcus had never allowed reality to define his dreams, and what neither of them knew was that someone else was about to make sure those dreams became possible. The morning of the SATs, Marcus arrived having worked until 3 a.m. and eaten nothing for 18 hours. His body was running on pure willpower, but his mind was sharp with the clarity that comes from having no choice but to succeed. He made it through the first 3 sections, his pencil moving with mechanical precision. But by question 47, his vision began to blur. The words swam on the page, and then everything went black. He woke up in the hospital emergency room, disoriented and panicked. Good, you're awake, the nurse said. Severe exhaustion and malnutrition. You need to take better care of yourself, young man. Marcus tried to sit up, his first thought about money. The bill. I can't pay for this, I need to leave. Actually, your hospital bill has been taken care of. Someone paid it in full. Who? Anonymous donor. They left this for you. The note was simple. Dear Marcus, your medical expenses have been covered. Focus on your recovery. You have more important things ahead of you. Someone believes in you. Marcus stared at the letter, confusion mixing with a growing sense of unease. Who would waste money on me? He whispered. But even as he asked the question, he felt the weight of being watched, of being known by someone he had never met. 3 days later, that feeling intensified when Marcus received an envelope that would change his life forever. His hands shook as he read the contents aloud to his empty room. Congratulations! You have been awarded a full scholarship to State University pre-medical program. Tuition, books, room and board. All expenses covered. Attached was another note. Marcus, excellence recognizes excellence. Make them proud. Make yourself proud. Someone is watching your journey with great interest. For the first time in his life, Marcus cried tears of joy. Someone had invested in him without wanting anything in return. Someone believed in his potential enough to bet their money on his future. Or so he thought. State University's pre-med program was a world away from the poverty and neglect Marcus had known. It was filled with students whose parents were doctors, lawyers, executives, people who belonged to a world that had never acknowledged his existence. My dad's buying me a BMW for starting med school, one student bragged, showing off his expensive watch. What did your parents get you? Marcus looked up from his worn textbook. The chance to be here. While his classmates attended fraternity parties and spring break trips, Marcus worked nights to pay for food and basic necessities the scholarship didn't cover. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had everything he needed to succeed academically, but he was still the outsider, still the one who didn't quite belong. Professor Martinez noticed Marcus's dedication during early morning anatomy class when he'd arrived straight from his night shift at the hospital. Williams, you study like your life depends on it. Marcus, exhausted but focused. It does, Professor. It's the only life I have. Marcus excelled academically, but remained completely isolated. His classmates saw him as an outsider. He saw them as reminders of everything he'd never had: family support, financial security, the assumption that the world would make space for their dreams. But something strange kept happening. Every time Marcus faced a financial crisis, help appeared in ways that made him increasingly paranoid. An envelope would appear in his mailbox containing $500 cash and a note. For textbooks, keep going. A new stethoscope would materialize in his locker with a card. A doctor needs proper tools. Lab equipment fees would be mysteriously waived. Food money would appear in his backpack during exam weeks. Marcus grew increasingly suspicious, confiding in his roommate. Someone's watching me. But what do they want from me? Nothing's free. Everything comes with a price. His roommate, A trust fund kid who couldn't understand Marcus's paranoia, shrugged. Maybe someone just wants to help. People don't help me, Marcus replied, his voice heavy with the weight of experience. They use me or they leave me. This person wants something. During his junior year, Marcus's suspicions were confirmed in a way that shattered his understanding of everything. While working in the administrative office to earn extra money, he stumbled upon a file that made his blood run cold. The folder was labelled M. Williams, Confidential, and contained detailed reports spanning years, photos of him from high school, copies of his grades, even surveillance notes about his daily routines. Marcus read aloud, his voice shaking. Subject shows remarkable resilience. Continues to excel despite adverse circumstances. Recommend continued financial support. Subject unaware of observation. At the bottom of the report was a signature that had been redacted, but the implications were clear. Someone had been watching him for years. They knew where he worked, what he ate, who he talked to. They had orchestrated his success from the shadows. I'm not just a scholarship recipient, Marcus whispered to himself in the empty office. I'm a project, someone's experiment. The benefactor knew things about Marcus that even he didn't know, things that would soon explain why this mysterious person had invested so much in his future. But first, Marcus had to become the doctor he was destined to be, even as the weight of being watched, of being chosen for reasons he couldn't understand, threatened to crush him. The boy who had survived abandonment, abuse, and poverty was about to face his greatest challenge yet, discovering that his entire life had been guided by forces he never knew existed, and that the price of his success might be more than he was prepared to pay. But that revelation would have to wait. Marcus Williams had work to do, lives to save, and a destiny to fulfill, whether he understood it or not. The transition from medical student to doctor hadn't been the triumph Marcus had imagined. 4 years of medical school had passed in a blur of exhaustion and excellence, but it was during his residency that Marcus discovered the true cost of his childhood wounds. While other residents collapsed from the brutal hours and pressure, Marcus thrived in ways that disturbed his colleagues. He worked 18-hour days like a machine programmed to save lives, sleeping in the hospital more nights than his apartment, his locker containing only a toothbrush, clean scrubs, and nothing else that suggested he had a life outside these walls. "Williams, don't you ever sleep?" a fellow resident asked, finding Marcus reviewing charts at 3 a.m. Marcus didn't look up from the patient files. "Sleep is for people who have homes to go to." The chief resident noticed it too. "Williams never makes mistakes. It's inhuman. I've never seen anything like it," he told the attending physicians. But what looked like exceptional dedication was actually something much more desperate. Marcus's perfection wasn't about being the best doctor. It was about filling a void that had been carved into his soul when he was 5 years old. The first time Marcus understood his true calling came through Mrs. Chen in room 314. She was 87, her mind clouded by dementia, abandoned by her family when caring for her became too difficult. Marcus found himself drawn to her bedside during his breaks, something about her loneliness echoing his own childhood abandonment. "I'll make sure you're not alone, Mrs. Chen," he promised, sitting beside her bed. "I'll visit you every day until you're better." Mrs. Chen looked at him with confused but grateful eyes. "Are you my grandson?" Marcus felt tears he hadn't shed in years. "Yes, Mrs. Chen, I'm your grandson." He kept that promise, visiting her every day, reading to her, holding her hand during the frightening moments when she couldn't remember where she was. When she died peacefully in her sleep 3 weeks later, Marcus realized she had given him something he'd never had, the chance to be someone's family. But it was 7-year-old Timothy Green who truly changed everything. The boy came in after a car accident, no family, no visitors, just like Marcus had been. As Marcus worked frantically to save him, he saw himself in that small, broken body. "Come on, Timothy! Don't you dare give up!" Marcus shouted, performing CPR with desperate intensity. "I'm here! I'm not leaving you!" But sometimes love isn't enough. Time of death, 11:47 p.m. Marcus stood in that room staring at the small body, and for the first time since his abandonment, he cried not for himself but for someone else. In that moment of devastating loss, he found his purpose. He couldn't save the abandoned child he had been, but maybe he could save the ones who came after. Word spread quickly through the hospital about Dr. Williams's unusual case preferences. When Dr. Harrison approached him with what others considered hopeless assignments, Marcus always accepted. "Williams, I'm assigning you to the Mitchell case. 90-year-old, no family, multiple organ failure. Frankly, it's hopeless." "I'll take it," Marcus replied without hesitation. "Every case other doctors avoided," Marcus requested. "The abandoned children, the elderly with no visitors, the homeless patients other doctors saw as charity cases." His colleagues began to notice the pattern. "He only takes patients no one else wants," one doctor observed. "It's like he's trying to save every abandoned soul in the city." Marcus overheard the comment and felt the truth of it resonate in his chest. "Someone has to care about the throwaway people," he said quietly. "If I don't, who will?" But Marcus's dedication to healing others was slowly destroying his ability to connect with anyone who tried to love him. His apartment looked like a hotel room. No photos, no personal items, nothing that suggested someone actually lived there. The few women who tried to build relationships with him found themselves competing with ghosts they couldn't see. Sarah lasted 6 months before the pattern became unbearable. "Marcus, your pager has gone off 6 times tonight," she said during what was supposed to be their anniversary dinner. "We haven't had a real conversation in months." Marcus reached for his phone automatically. "I'm sorry, people are depending on me." "You're emotionally unavailable, Marcus. You love your patients more than you could ever love a person who loves you." The words stung because they were true. Marcus watched Sarah walk away, feeling the familiar ache of abandonment, but unable to understand why he couldn't hold on to someone who wanted to stay. Jennifer tried harder, lasting almost a year before she too reached her breaking point. She found Marcus in his sterile apartment after another 16-hour shift, staring at case files instead of the dinner she'd prepared. "I thought I could compete with your work," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I can't compete with your pain. You use those patients to avoid dealing with your own heart." Marcus looked up, genuinely confused. "I save lives, Jennifer. What's wrong with that?" "Nothing's wrong with saving lives. Everything's wrong with using it to avoid living your own." After she left, Marcus stood in his empty apartment, surrounded by the silence he'd thought he preferred. He walked to the bathroom mirror and whispered the truth he'd been hiding from himself. "Maybe I'm incapable of love. Maybe whatever makes people lovable died in me when I was 5. By the time Marcus turned 29, he had saved over 500 lives and earned recognition that should have felt like victory. Standing before a crowd of his peers at the annual medical conference, receiving the highest honor in cardiac surgery, he scanned the audience looking for one familiar face, one person who was there for him as Marcus Williams the person, not Dr. Williams the surgeon. "Dr. Williams has the highest success rate in the country for high-risk cardiac procedures," the conference host announced. "Let's give him the recognition he deserves." As hundreds of people applauded, Marcus felt the crushing loneliness of his success. The seats were filled with colleagues, administrators, strangers, but no one who knew his story, no one who loved Marcus, the abandoned child who had become this accomplished man. That night, holding his award in his empty apartment, Marcus spoke to the reflection in the metal surface. 500 lives saved, 500 families reunited, 500 people who get to go home to someone who loves them. He paused, the weight of his isolation pressing down on him. And here I am, alone, talking to a piece of metal. The darkness that followed was deeper than any he'd experienced since childhood. Marcus found himself walking to his bathroom, opening the medicine cabinet, staring at the bottle of sleeping pills he'd prescribed for his own insomnia. For the first time in his adult life, he considered taking them all. "I saved everyone except myself," he whispered, the bottle trembling in his hands. "What's the point of saving lives if you can't save your own soul?" The phone rang, cutting through the silence like a lifeline he hadn't known he needed. "Dr. Williams?" The hospital operator's voice was urgent. "We have an emergency surgery. Patient specifically requested you." Marcus set down the bottle, his hands still shaking. "What's the case?" 44-year-old female, acute heart failure. Name is Diane Williams." The bottle slipped from Marcus's fingers, clattering into the sink. His legs gave out and he sank to the bathroom floor, gasping for air as 25 years of carefully constructed walls began to crumble. That same night, someone else was fighting for her life in a hospital bed, carrying secrets that would transform everything Marcus thought he knew about love, abandonment, and the mysterious forces that had shaped his entire existence. The drive to the hospital felt like travelling through time. Every traffic light, every street corner seemed to pulse with memories Marcus had spent decades trying to bury. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white, and he found himself having conversations with the air. "I can't do this," he whispered to his reflection in the rearview mirror. "I can't see her. I can't save the person who destroyed me." But as Marcus sat in the hospital parking lot, engine running, escape still possible, something hit him with the force of revelation. Every abandoned patient he'd chosen, every hopeless case he'd fought for, every throwaway person he'd refused to give up on, they had all been practice for this moment. "I've been preparing for this my entire career," he said aloud, his voice growing stronger. "Every person I saved who reminded me of myself. I was learning how to save her." Room 314. The same number as Mrs. Chen's room, where he'd first learned what it meant to choose to love someone who couldn't love him back. The universe, Marcus realised, had a twisted sense of poetry. The woman lying in the hospital bed looked nothing like the monster from his childhood nightmares. She was thin, fragile, her face marked by years of hard living, but somehow peaceful in a way that seemed impossible given the chaos she'd once embodied. But it was what sat on her bedside table that stopped Marcus's heart completely. With trembling hands, he picked up a worn scrapbook, its pages yellowed with age and careful handling. The first page contained a newspaper clipping from 1997, the paper brittle but the image clear. "Local boy wins science fair." 8-year-old Marcus Williams took first place in the county science fair with his project on heart anatomy. Marcus read aloud, his voice breaking. He turned the page, then another, each one revealing a piece of his life he thought no one had cared enough to remember. High school honour roll announcements, his college acceptance letter, somehow she'd gotten a copy. Medical school graduation photos taken from a distance, blurry but unmistakably proud documentation of a mother who couldn't be present but refused to be absent. Every award, every achievement, every milestone of his life was there, carefully preserved, lovingly documented. Years of proof that someone had been watching, celebrating, grieving his victories and defeats from the shadows. "You never left," Marcus whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You never stopped watching." The sound of his voice seemed to stir something in the woman on the bed. Diane Williams's eyes fluttered open, and when they focused on Marcus, her face transformed with a joy so pure it was almost painful to witness. "My baby," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with wonder. "My baby became everything I dreamed you would become." Marcus stepped back as if struck. Don't call me that." "You're so handsome," Diane continued, struggling to sit up. "So accomplished. Look at you, you're exactly who I prayed you'd become." The word prayed hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You prayed? You prayed for me? After what you said? After you threw me away like garbage?" Diane's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. "I never threw you away, Marcus. I set you free." The words hung in the air between them. carrying a weight that seemed to shift the very foundation of everything Marcus had believed about his life. "I've been clean for 8 years, baby," Diane continued, each word an effort, but spoken with determination. 8 years sober, working, trying to become someone worthy of asking for your forgiveness. Marcus stared at her, his mind reeling. "Clean? For 8 years? I got clean the day I read about your medical school acceptance in the newspaper," Diane explained. "I realized my little boy was going to become a doctor, and I wanted to be someone he wouldn't be ashamed of." She reached into the drawer beside her bed with shaking hands, pulling out a collection of receipts, bank statements, and official documents. Marcus watched, uncomprehending as she spread them across the bedsheet like evidence in a trial. "Every penny I earned cleaning office buildings at night went to your education," she said, her voice growing stronger with each revelation. "The hospital bills when you collapsed during your SATs, the scholarship that appeared when you needed it most, the textbook money, the food allowances during your hardest semesters." Marcus felt the world tilting around him. "That was you? You've been the anonymous donor this whole time? I worked 3 cleaning jobs, slept 4 hours a night, lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches so you could have everything I never could give you when I was using." The magnitude of what she was telling him was almost impossible to process. "You've been sacrificing for me while I spent every day cursing your name." Diane reached out carefully, her fingers barely touching his hand. "Loving someone means wanting what's best for them, even when they hate you for it, even when it breaks your heart every single day." Marcus sat down in the chair beside her bed, his mind spinning from everything she had told him. His whole life story was changing right before his eyes. But Diane wasn't done. There was one more truth that would shock him even more. "Marcus," she said, her voice becoming very serious, "there's something about your birth you need to know, something I've never told anyone." She pulled out an official-looking document from under the other papers. Marcus read the top with growing confusion. "Birth certificate, amended. Father, Judge Robert Sterling." Marcus read out loud, his voice getting louder. "You know who my father is. All these years you knew." Diane's face crumpled with pain that still looked fresh after all these years. "I lied about who your father was to protect you, and to protect myself." Marcus felt like his whole world was falling apart and rebuilding itself at the same time. Everything he thought he knew was wrong. "A judge? You were raped by a judge?" "Your real father is Judge Robert Sterling," Diane continued, her voice so quiet he could barely hear her. "He was 35 when he raped me. I was 14, living in a group home, and he was supposed to be helping me find a permanent family." The clinical details hit Marcus like physical blows. A respected judge raped a 14-year-old girl in the system meant to protect her. "He told me no one would believe me," Diane continued, her voice growing stronger as she finally spoke truths that had been eating her alive for decades. "His word against a foster kid's. He was right. Who was going to believe a throwaway girl over a pillar of the community?" Marcus understood now why she couldn't look at him, why his very existence had been a source of pain rather than joy. "I looked like him." "You have his eyes, his chin, his hands," Diane confirmed. "I couldn't look at you without seeing the man who destroyed my childhood. But I also couldn't stop loving you. You were innocent, but you were also a daily reminder of the worst thing that had ever happened to me." The pieces of his mother's behavior suddenly formed a picture that was heartbreaking rather than cruel. "That's why you couldn't keep me, not because you didn't love me. Because I loved you too much to let my trauma poison your life," Diane finished. "You deserved better than a mother who flinched every time she looked at her own child." Marcus felt 25 years of anger and abandonment reshaping themselves into something that looked suspiciously like compassion. "You gave me up to save me from your pain." But even as he processed this revelation, Diane was reaching for another envelope, this one sealed and yellowed with age. "There's one more thing," she said. "Your Abuela Rosa. She made me promise to give this to you when the time was right." Marcus took the envelope with hands that had steadied during thousands of surgeries but now trembled like leaves. Inside was a letter written in the careful script of someone for whom writing was precious and rare. "My dearest Marcus," Marcus read aloud, Rosa's voice somehow present in every carefully formed word. "If you are reading this, then Diane has found the courage to tell you the truth about the hardest decision we ever had to make." Marcus's voice caught as he continued reading. "I made your mother promise to give you away." The words hit him like a physical blow. "What?" Diane watched as Marcus read, her own tears falling as she relived the most painful conversation of her life. "I was dying, Mijo." Marcus continued reading Rosa's letter. "The doctors told me I had weeks, not months. The cancer was eating me alive and I couldn't let you watch me disappear piece by piece." Marcus looked up at Diane, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Abuela Rosa planned my abandonment." "She knew she was dying," Diane confirmed. "She made me promise to take you from her funeral and give you to people who could give you a future neither of us could provide." Marcus returned to the letter, his voice breaking with each revelation. "I told Diane exactly what to say to make you hate her. The cruel words, the rejection. It was all scripted to make the separation easier for you." "Every word I said that day was Rosa's script," Diane whispered. "She made me memorize every cruel phrase because she knew if you still loved me, you'd never let them place you somewhere safe." The cruelest moment of Marcus's life was being rewritten as an act of love so profound it had taken him 30 years to understand it. "I never wanted you. You ruined my life. Rosa made you say those things?" "Rosa knew I was too young and too damaged to raise you properly," Diane explained. "But she also knew I'd never willingly give you up unless I thought it would save you from becoming like me." Marcus felt the final pieces of his childhood trauma rearranging themselves into a completely different picture. "The cruelest thing anyone ever said to me was actually love. The hardest love either of us had ever given," Diane confirmed. As if summoned by the weight of these revelations, alarms began sounding around Diane's bed. Her heart monitor showed erratic rhythms, her blood pressure dropping dangerously low. Dr. Patterson, the chief of surgery, approached with the gravity of someone delivering impossible news. "Marcus, her condition is deteriorating rapidly. We have an experimental procedure that might save her, but it has only a 20% survival rate." Marcus felt panic rising in his chest, the little boy who had been abandoned threatening to overwhelm the accomplished doctor. "No, I didn't become a doctor to lose you again. I didn't save 500 lives to lose the one that matters most." Marcus looked at his mother, and for the first time in 25 years he could think of her that way without pain, and made the choice that would define not just his career but his soul. "I'll do the surgery," he said firmly. "She didn't sacrifice everything just to die on me now." "I spent my whole life thinking I was the child you threw away," he said, taking her hand. "But you didn't throw me away. You set me free." Diane managed a smile that transformed her face back into the young mother who had loved him more than her own life. "You were never trash, baby. You were a bird I had to push out of the nest so you could learn to fly." Marcus felt something shift inside him, a healing that went deeper than any surgery could reach. "I'm not just saving my mother. I'm saving myself. I'm saving the part of me that's been broken for 25 years. As he scrubbed in for the most important surgery of his life, Marcus whispered words that would have seemed impossible just hours before. "If she dies on this table, at least she'll know I forgave her." For 12 hours, Dr. Marcus Williams performed surgery with hands that had never been steadier and a heart that had never been more open. Every technique he'd mastered, every innovation he'd pioneered, every moment of training came together in service of saving the woman who had saved him by letting him go. "I forgive you, Mama," he whispered as he worked, his hands moving with precision while tears fell behind his surgical mask. "I forgive you for the drugs, for the abandonment, for the cruel words that weren't even yours. I forgive you for being 14 and scared, I forgive you for being human. I forgive you for loving me the only way you knew how. But the most important words came last. I forgive myself for hating you when you were trying to love me the best way you could. As dawn broke over the city, Marcus emerged from surgery transformed. He had entered that operating room as an abandoned child who had become a doctor. He walked out as a man who finally understood what it meant to be truly loved. She's stable, he told the waiting medical team, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and wonder. The surgery worked. But the real miracle wasn't medical. The real miracle was that a little boy who had been thrown away 25 years ago had finally caught himself. And in saving his mother's life, Dr. Marcus Williams had learned how to save his own. The healing that followed was unlike anything either of them had experienced. For the first time in decades, Marcus took time off work, spending 14 days at his mother's bedside, giving her the reports she'd missed while loving him from the shadows. Today, I saved Mrs. Roberts' life, he told her, as she drifted in and out of consciousness. 83 years old reminded me of Abuela Rosa. I think you would have liked her. I used to think I became a doctor to prove something to the world, but I think I became a doctor to prove something to you, to prove that the little boy you set free actually helped people. When Diane was strong enough to truly listen, the conversations they'd both waited 25 years to have finally began. And with them came revelations that would change not just their relationship, but the trajectory of countless other lives. I want to start a foundation, Marcus told her one afternoon, sunlight streaming through the hospital window, for kids like I was. Diane, stronger now but still fragile, smiled. Kids like we were. I was thrown away too, Marcus. By my own mother, by the system, by everyone who should have protected me. What would we call it? Marcus thought of Timothy Green, of Mrs. Chen, of all the abandoned souls he'd fought to save. The Thrown Away Children Foundation. Because being discarded doesn't mean you're worthless. Sometimes it means you're being prepared to catch others. 6 months later, mother and son stood together on a stage before an audience of families torn apart by trauma, addiction, and impossible circumstances. Diane approached the podium with nervous hands but a steady voice. My name is Diane Williams, she began, and 25 years ago I made the hardest decision of my life. I gave away my son to save him from my pain. She looked out at the audience, seeing her own story reflected in dozens of faces. I want to tell you about the night I threw away my child, and how he saved my life by forgiving me. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of families reached out, parents and children separated by forces beyond their control, all looking for a way back to each other, all learning that sometimes the cruelest acts of love are the ones that hurt the most but save the most lives. Marcus watched his mother speak and realized that their story wasn't just about healing personal wounds. It was about proving that redemption is always possible, that love can survive even the most devastating abandonment, and that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the deepest losses. 1 year after its founding, the Thrown Away Children Foundation had reunited over 200 families. But the most important reunion was still happening every day, not in the foundation's offices, but in the quiet moments between a mother and son who had travelled decades to find their way back to love. On this particular morning, Marcus and Diane found themselves standing in the hospital room where she had made the hardest decision of her life 25 years ago. Room 237, Marcus said quietly. I remember every detail of this place. Diane's voice was soft but steady. So do I. The worst day of my life happened in this room. Mine too, Marcus replied, then looked at her with something that might have been wonder. But look what it created. From that shared understanding of abandonment and redemption, they discovered they could reach children and parents in ways others couldn't. In the months that followed, they worked side by side, their complementary wounds becoming their greatest strength. Marcus would kneel before frightened children with the authority of someone who had lived their terror. I know you're frightened. I know you feel like no one wants you. but being thrown away doesn't mean you're worthless. How do you know? A scared 6-year-old asked him once. Because I was thrown away too, and look how I turned out. Meanwhile, Diane found herself drawn to the struggling mothers, the ones drowning in addiction and self-hatred. I was where you are, she would tell them, high, desperate, convinced I was poison to my own child. Recovery is possible. Love is possible. Even after you think you've destroyed everything. But healing old wounds sometimes means facing the source of the deepest pain. 6 months after the Foundation's launch, a letter arrived that would test everything Marcus and Diane had built together. Judge Robert Sterling, the man whose violence had set their entire story in motion, wanted to meet. The confrontation came at the Foundation's first annual gala. Marcus stood at the podium, Diane beside him for support, as he made an announcement that stunned the crowd. I'd like to introduce someone who's helped make this foundation possible. Judge Robert Sterling, distinguished and trembling, approached the microphone. My name is Judge Robert Sterling, and I am Marcus Williams' biological father. The silence in the room was deafening as he continued. 30 years ago, I committed a crime that destroyed a 14-year-old girl's life. I raped Diane Williams, and Marcus was born from that violence. Marcus moved protectively closer to Diane. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, Robert said, his voice breaking. I've spent 30 years watching from a distance as my son became everything I never was. Honourable, compassionate, heroic. I came here tonight to make amends, to offer financial support, to try to... I already have a father, Marcus interrupted, his voice calm but firm. He gestured toward Diane. The woman standing beside me. She's my family. She chose to love me when she could have chosen to hate me. She sacrificed everything to give me a chance at life. The crowd hung on every word as Marcus continued. You may have contributed DNA, but you didn't contribute love. And love is what makes a family. Judge Robert Sterling nodded, humbled. You're right. I wanted you to know that I'm proud of who you've become. Then support the foundation, Marcus replied. Help us save other children, but don't mistake biology for family. In the months that followed that difficult confrontation, the Foundation's impact grew in ways none of them had imagined. Marcus found himself speaking to larger and larger audiences, his message evolving as he did. I spent 30 years believing love meant never leaving, he told a crowd of social workers and foster families. But sometimes love means leaving so someone can become who they're meant to be. My mother didn't throw me away. She set me free to catch others who were falling. The Foundation expanded, opening satellite offices and training programs. A memorial wing was dedicated to Rosa Williams, the grandmother whose love had made everything possible. The banner read, "In memory of the grandmother who taught us that love sometimes means letting go." 3 years later, the little boy who once believed he had no family now found himself surrounded by more love than he had ever dreamed possible. Sunday dinners at his home had become a tradition, with Diane, now affectionately called Grandma Diane, as the guest of honour. Grandma Diane, tell us the story again about when Daddy was little, pleaded his 6-year-old daughter, climbing onto Diane's lap. Diane, her hair silver now but her eyes bright with joy, smiled. Well, once upon a time there was a little boy who thought he was thrown away, but he was actually being prepared to save the world. Marcus's wife Catherine watched the scene with quiet amazement. Later, as they cleaned dishes together, she asked Diane the question that had been haunting her. How did you know he'd forgive you? Diane paused, considering. I didn't. But I knew that if I raised him right in the time I had, he'd grow up to be the kind of man who could forgive. Love teaches love, even from a distance. The work continued, but Marcus was no longer carrying the weight alone. His foundation had become a family of dedicated professionals, all working toward the same goal. Dr. Williams, your 3 o'clock is here, his nurse announced. Another abandoned child case. Tell them I'll be right there, Marcus replied, no longer feeling the old panic at those words. And call the foundation, see if we can get family services involved proactively this time. Today, the Thrown Away Children Foundation operates in 12 states. Over 1,000 families have been reunited. Hundreds of children have been placed in loving homes. Dozens of parents have successfully completed addiction treatment. But the real miracle isn't in the numbers. It's in understanding that love doesn't always look like holding on. Sometimes the greatest love looks like letting go. In quiet moments when the foundation work is done and the cameras are off, Marcus and Diane sometimes find themselves marveling at the impossible journey that brought them here. What do you say to a mother who threw you away to save you? Marcus wonders aloud. What do you say to a son who caught himself and then came back to catch you? Diane responds. Together, they have found their answer. Thank you. If you or someone you know is struggling with family separation, addiction, or abandonment, resources are available. Sometimes the first step toward healing is understanding that being thrown away doesn't define your worth. Love finds a way, even when it takes 25 years. If this story touched your heart, if it changed how you think about love, forgiveness, and second chances, then please hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell. These are the stories that matter, stories that show us the incredible power of human resilience and love. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message about forgiveness, about the complex ways people love each other, about never giving up on family, share this video with them immediately. Sometimes the story someone needs to hear is the one that helps them understand their own life differently. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever had to forgive someone who hurt you while trying to love you? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of second chances, and subscribe for more incredible true stories that will change how you see the world. Remember, being thrown away doesn't mean you're worthless. Sometimes it means you're being prepared to catch others who are falling. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story that will touch your soul.